Las Vegas Raiders defensive tackle Adam Butler is now a free agent, but today he spoke on a podcast and made it clear he wants to return to the Raiders. Let's talk about what he said and why the team should bring him back. In the interview with Hondo Carpenter, Butler shared his feelings about the Raiders. He said, "It would really be a dream come true. I love this team, I love the organization, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." That's a strong message. He wants to stay, and if you're the Raiders front office, you have to seriously consider making it happen. Butler has improved a lot over the years. Last season, he ranked among the top 12 run defenders in the NFL. No, he might not be that huge nose tackle who takes on double-team blocks, but the stats don't lie. He made big plays against the run. He also ranked top 15 in sacks and quarterback hits for defensive tackles. The Raiders' defensive line has potential. Last season, they had Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, Malcolm Kuntz, and Butler. On paper, that lineup looked strong, but we didn't fully get to see them dominate together. If Butler returns, the Raiders could finally have the solid defensive front they've been building. Right now, he's a free agent. The question is, will the Raiders bring him back? We're also not completely sure if all the defensive players from last season will be back. But one thing is clear, Adam Butler would be a much cheaper option to keep compared to some others. Butler is 30 years old, but that doesn't mean he's worn out. He came into the NFL later than most players, spent extra time in college, and didn't play as many snaps early in his career. That means his body hasn't taken as much wear and tear as other 30-year-old players. Now, let's talk about what makes Butler special. He's an elite pass rusher. In one-on-one situations, he can beat almost any offensive lineman. For example, imagine a team like the Los Angeles Chargers. If they focus their blocking on stopping Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, that leaves Butler in a one-on-one matchup. And Butler wins those battles. If you look at past games, he's had success against top linemen like Joe Thuney and Trey Smith. Why? Because he's quick, explosive, and hard to block. He moves faster than most defensive tackles, making him a real problem for offenses. One more thing. Not every player wants to stay with the Raiders. Many free agents come, play for a year or two, and leave. But Butler has made it clear. He wants to stay. That's something the Raiders need to think about as they make their decisions. Not every player wants to stay with the Raiders. Look at Josh Jacobs. Even though the Raiders reportedly offered him the same contract as the Packers, he still chose to leave. But Adam Butler is different. He wants to stay. I've personally spoken with Butler through social media, and one thing is clear. He's a high-character player. He's not just here for a paycheck. He cares about being great. Cam Newton once said that not every NFL player actually cares about winning. Some just want to collect their salary. But Butler is not one of those guys. Now let's talk about the 2025 NFL Draft and the defensive tackles coming out this year. The Raiders have the 6th overall pick in each round. That means they have big decisions to make. Should they draft a defensive end? A quarterback? A defensive tackle? Some say this is one of the best defensive tackle draft classes in years. A player like Mason Graham could be a top choice at pick number 6. But the Raiders have options. They could take a quarterback early and grab a defensive tackle in the 2nd round. The question is, what's the smartest move for the team? There are a few defensive tackles who might go in the 1st round, but I don't think any of them are worth the 6th overall pick. Even Mason Graham, who many see as a top 3 talent, doesn't impress me as much as others think. Take Jalen Carter, for example. He was a top 3 player in his draft class, and you could see his talent on tape. His pass rush moves and technique were elite. I don't see the same level of skill with Mason Graham. Yes, he's strong and has a powerful punch, but everyone in the NFL is strong. That kind of strength doesn't always translate to success in the league. Now, if the Raiders want a defensive tackle, I'd rather they wait until the 2nd round. One player I really like is Deone Walker from Kentucky. Here's why he's a great fit for the Raiders. Christian Wilkins is a 3-technique defensive tackle. This means he's built for a specific role, using speed and agility to rush the passer. The Raiders need the opposite, a strong, physical nose tackle. This player has to handle double teams from centers and guards and stop the run. That's exactly what Deone Walker can do. Walker could go in the top 20 to 25 picks, so he might not be available in the second round. But if he is, the Raiders should grab him. Even if Adam Butler returns, Walker would still be a great addition because Butler's play style is more similar to Wilkins. This is the kind of player the Raiders' defense really needs. Deone Walker would be a great fit for the Raiders' defense, but he's not the only option. There are other big defensive linemen in this draft class who could help the team. Alfred Collins, Texas, a rising defensive tackle with great potential. He had an impressive performance at the Senior Bowl. Cam Jackson, Florida. This guy is huge, 6'4" to 6'5", 345 pounds, but still fast with good pass rush skills. He could go in the second or third round. The Raiders need more depth on the interior defensive line, just like the Philadelphia Eagles' strong defensive front. Adding big, talented players would help them rotate fresh players throughout the game. A few more names to watch. Omar Lott, Tennessee, a solid defensive tackle but a bit smaller than most top picks. Anas Peebles, also a smaller DT, but his Senior Bowl tape was very impressive. Size matters for pass-rushing DTS, and 6-foot-tall players usually don't get picked early. However, Peebles dominated at the Senior Bowl, winning a lot of one-on-one battles. The Raiders have options, and they need to find the right guy to strengthen their defensive line. Anas Peebles showed great pass-rushing skills, but he struggled against the run. If the Raiders can pick him up in round 4, he could be a solid addition. Now, let's talk about some other top defensive tackles in this draft. Walter Nolan. He's getting a lot of hype, but is he worth the 6th overall pick? Probably not. Even if the Raiders trade down to pick 22, he may not be the impact player they need. Derek Harmon, Oregon. He transferred to Oregon last season and had a strong performance. He's a good pass rusher and plays with power. He might fit well with Christian Wilkins if the Raiders want to strengthen their defensive front. This defensive tackle class is one of the best in years, possibly as strong as the 2019 draft, which had stars like Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons, and Quinnen Williams. This year, we could see 7 or 8 defensive tackles drafted in the first round. Another name to watch, Darius Alexander, Toledo. He has shown a lot of potential, not just in college but also at the Senior Bowl. With so many talented defensive tackles, the Raiders have great options to improve their defensive line. Many defensive tackles stood out at the Senior Bowl, and it's interesting to see who got invited. For example, Alfred Collins was there, which confirms he played in the Senior Bowl, not the Shrine Bowl. There was also a player from the Hula Bowl that caught my attention, Junior Tanu. He's a hard-working player and performed really well. In fact, he impressed enough to get invited to the Senior Bowl, where he had some solid reps, but with so many great players at the Senior Bowl, it's tough to evaluate everyone. Some names get attention on social media, while others go unnoticed. Anas Peebles had a great Senior Bowl, yet he didn't trend as much as expected. Cam Jackson also had a strong showing, and Jordan Phillips performed well at the Shrine Bowl. This defensive tackle class is very strong, and the Raiders have a chance to add depth to their lineup. If Adam Butler doesn't return, they may even draft 2 defensive tackles. It's important for them to bring in talented linemen to build a dominant defense. One thing is clear: the Raiders must learn from past mistakes. Passing on Jalen Carter was a big misstep, and they can't afford to miss out on top talent again. The Raiders have made several mistakes in past drafts, not just by passing on Jalen Carter. They also picked the wrong Byron Young, drafted Neil Farrell Jr., and took other defensive linemen who didn't work out. Now, it's up to John Spytek and his team to get it right this time. This draft class is deep with talent, and the Raiders must find a strong defensive tackle. Even if they bring back Adam Butler and already have Christian Wilkins, they need more power in the middle. A dominant defensive line could be the key to the Raiders winning a Super Bowl in the next 3 to 5 years. In other news, there's been a big change in the front office. The Raiders and assistant general manager Champ Kelly have mutually agreed to part ways, according to Tom Pelissero. The new GM, John Spytek, is taking full control, and Kelly will look for opportunities elsewhere. However, this decision is surprising because Kelly was still under contract and didn't get a GM job with another team. Realistically, this looks like Spytek letting him go, even though it's being called a mutual decision. Kelly had interviews for GM roles, but it's unclear how serious those teams were about hiring him. Still, the fact that the Raiders are moving on from him is interesting. Spytek is expected to have a big role in the draft, just like he did in Tampa Bay. Back then, he wasn't the GM, but he was trusted to make draft decisions. It will be interesting to see how much power he has now. It looks like John Spytek will follow the same approach he used in Tampa Bay. The assistant GM that the Raiders bring in will likely have a lot of power, and that might be why Spytek moved on from Champ Kelly, so he could hire his own person. Now, the big question is, what will the Raiders do at quarterback? The Buccaneers went through different routes in the past. They drafted Jameis Winston, then later signed Tom Brady and Baker Mayfield in free agency. Could the Raiders do the same? If they go the free agent route, that would mean keeping their number 6 pick and using it to improve the roster instead of gambling on a developmental quarterback in the second round. This strategy could help them get better immediately, rather than waiting for a young quarterback to develop. It will be interesting to see which direction Spytek and the Raiders take. It's going to be exciting to see how things play out. We're 3 weeks away from free agency, and we'll start hearing about players getting cut. For example, Gardner Minshew might get cut, and we could hear the Raiders might not bring back Trayvon Mullen and Trayvon Moehrig, both of whom will be testing free agency. As we get closer to that time, I'll keep you updated. But for Trayvon Mullen, who was drafted in the second round and is a top 10 safety, you always want to try to bring back your own players before they hit free agency. It's tough, especially with the changes in the front office. The Raiders went from Tom FCO to John Spytek, and Spytek didn't have the chance to lock down players like Moehrig during the season. Moving forward, I hope the Raiders can take care of their own players during the season and avoid letting them test free agency. I also hope the team only has to focus on improving the roster with key additions instead of having to spend big money to fill gaps. The Raiders' goal should be to pay their own players, build a strong team, and hopefully win a Super Bowl. As for Champ Kelly, he's no longer with the Raiders, and hopefully the team can bring back Adam Butler. If not, there's a strong defensive tackle class this year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.